Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope where you are, it's not like the East Coast here where it's raining. And it has been for a couple of days. Fortunately, no one has to build an ark yet, but it's coming. It's Jim, it's Amadeus. And Amadeus, we got some record numbers. That Iowa LSU game, racked up some pretty amazing numbers. It hit 12.3 in the ratings, which for those out there who wonder, that was better than the NBA Finals last year. There was no game that rated that high. There was no Major League Baseball World Series game last year that rated that high. So we're talking some pretty high numbers, and they got the Final Four coming up on Friday night. So you mentioned yourself that it was one of the first, or not necessarily the first, but one of the few women's games you've watched in a while.
Yeah, definitely don't watch the women's games often. They're not really they're hardly on TV up here, but yeah, it was definitely a very entertaining game to watch. I watched it from start to finish, so honestly, it doesn't surprise me that it beat out the NBA Finals because I mean, who's watching the NBA these days? I mean, to be fair to the NBA, it's harder, I guess, when it's a 7 game series, and
Sure.
especially in those last games, if a team's up like 3
Hmm.
nothing or 3-1, like the Nuggets were,
Right.
just destroying everybody in the path. Then I can see that how it's harder with these one-off games in a tournament, or even like the Super Bowl. That's just that one game everybody's anticipating, but still. I thought it was a very entertaining game, and I wouldn't be shocked if UConn and Iowa surpassed that this
Hmm.
Friday.
Yeah, we neither. We talked in the pre-show. I would have loved to have seen ESPN put it on ABC, so you would have had access to a much wider audience. But they didn't ask me, so that's the way it goes. The thing that and we've talked about this a number of times. People say they want to see Cinderella, right? They don't. Because if you look at the ratings, if that were, let's say, if it was a Dodgers Yankees World Series, okay, guaranteed the numbers would be through the roof. If it was an NBA final that had the Celtics and the Lakers, or Golden State and I'm trying to think of a good team in the East that that people would watch. Well, Golden State and the Knicks. The Knicks aren't as good as Golden State, and Golden State's not as good as they were. But again, my point being, name brands. Name brands are what people want to see, and like it or not, they're not that crazy about seeing what we enjoyed seeing the Diamondbacks show up. That's great. The rest of the country didn't give a damn. So that's just the way it works. And, we can sit here and pontificate on how much we want to see the Cinderellas make it, but Cinderella doesn't draw ratings.
Yeah, definitely doesn't draw ratings, and I mean, like we're gonna find out with the men's Final Four, right?
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
but let's be honest, everybody's already penciled in the Purdue
Oh,
UConn final.
yeah.
And if you look at the spreads, you got double-digit spreads. So, like, yeah, as you said, the Cinderellas are nice up to this point, but everybody wants to see the name brand final there, UConn and Purdue. So
Yeah. They don't.
definitely, the proof is in the pudding.
Alabama and NC State, I'm contractually obligated to watch, but it would be my first choice to watch that game. I wouldn't watch that game during a regular season. So, it is what it is. But Connecticut's on a march, and they're fun to watch. I mean, just the way they pass, the way they move without the ball. I mean, it's just fun to watch them play. And so, okay, Zach Edey is the best player, in college basketball, or so they say. We'll see if he gets the Wooden Award. He certainly is the favorite to do it, and that's kind of like the Heisman Trophy of basketball. So, he may be the best player in the country, but he may not be on the best team in the country. We'll see.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And
Hmm.
we've talked a lot about, depth is going to come into play here if it is
Hmm.
UConn and Purdue. And as you mentioned, the
Yeah,
UConn's like 10 players deep.
they run
They
them
could,
all at you.
yeah, they could sub the whole starting lineup out, and they're still coming at you. So
Well, he did. Hurley did in that game. The first half of the game against San Diego State. I mean, he was mad at the starting lineup, took everybody out and brought a whole group back. So there
Yeah.
you go.
And it just goes to show you on these good teams, like the backups have something to prove. They don't want to be backups. They want to show we're
Right.
good enough to be starters. So when they get their chance like that, they're going to show out. And I think that's part of what makes UConn so great, right? They have
Mhm.
a deep bench as well as a great starting rotation, and that's they all push each other to be better because
Right. And
they
and
know there's
Hurley,
only five
yeah,
spots to start.
absolutely. And Hurley is smart enough to get people playing time. He'll work it so that he'll take one guy out, put the other guy. It's almost in some regards like watching hockey. I mean, he has he'll do line changes at times, and because a lot of people say, well, how come they don't get into foul trouble? Well, they don't get into foul trouble because guys aren't in there for 20 and 30 minutes at a time. So you're not going to get in foul trouble if you're on the court all that time. Yes, but if you keep rotating, no, you're not gonna.
Yeah.
So it benefits them very well. All right, the Sycamores, my friend, your buds. Talk about tonight's NIT final.
Yeah, so we got Indiana State and Seton Hall, and yes, we got the NIT finals. The game's
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's one of those where these are probably the two biggest, or not maybe not the two biggest, but out of teams in the NIT, these were the two biggest snubs by far.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we talked a lot about Indiana State
Mm-hmm.
getting snubbed with our nephews over there at
Mm-hmm.
South Florida, but
Right.
Indiana State, let's be real. Indiana State was the true first team left out of the tournament.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Hell, they were ranked in the top 30, I think 27th or something
Yeah.
in the net rankings, which literally stands for NCAA evaluation tool. It is their guidelines to decide who's a good team in the country,
Right.
and they left a top 30 team, what they thought was a top 30 team in the country, out of the tournament, which again, find the logic, but we understand the NCAA doesn't use logic, so you
God
have to
forbid.
keep
Yes.
that in mind. But yeah, and that's the thing. They made history with that decision because Indiana State was the highest net ranked team to ever not make the tournament. So talk about a snub, but even Seton Hall, everybody wants to talk about St. John's was the real snub because they were, I think, 32 in the net rankings or whatever, and they were again another team. But really, if you look at the season Seton Hall had, Seton Hall, they were fourth in that Big East conference, and the Big East only got 3 bids, which pretty much everybody was shocked about. Big East is talking about like one of the best conferences in the country.
Yeah.
Hell, it's got the national defending champion and a team that's in the Final Four right now. So, clearly the Big East is a good conference. How they only got the 3 bids, we'll never know. But yeah, Seton Hall was, they were 13-7 in the conference. I believe they beat UConn. That was one of UConn's only losses this year. Yeah, first conference game of the season. They lost in Seton Hall. So the Seton Hall's got some impressive wins. So yeah, I think. And they're both number 1 seeds in this tournament. So everything was pointing to this final. You got the two biggest snubbed teams pretty much. And it's going to be a great one because I think Indiana State opened up as about a 1.5, 2-point favorite. And it's around 2.5, 3 right now, depending on the book you get it at. But yeah, it's going to be a very good game because Seton Hall,
and they're going to play
impressed.
it. Yeah. And they're playing it in Indiana. So, not that far. Indiana's not that big a state that you can't get there. So there's going to be a lot of fans that are Indiana fans, and that it'll be fun. It's going to be a fun game, and should be a crazy situation. This just in: the Bills are going to trade Stephon Diggs, 4-time All-Pro wide receiver, to the Texans.
So do we finally say it? Is Buffalo dead, Jim? Is this the end of?
I'm just taking a quick look here at the story.
The Bills' competitive era.
I don't. I don't know. I mean, it's I hate to throw sand on them yet, but um, if you look and see what Houston did in the offseason by signing a couple of defensive studs, um, and they upgraded some offensive linemen. CJ Stroud isn't going to take a step back, I don't think. So yeah, I mean it's it's kind of like the passing of the torch from the Buffalo Bills over to Houston. So
Yeah,
it's going to
there's
be an
no
interesting
doubt
situation.
Houston's going to have some talent this year for sure.
Hmm.
But I meant to just like, the Bills, they're losing their number one receiver. People have
Right.
already been questioning Josh Allen with the
Yeah.
turnovers and stuff like that the last 2 years.
Hmm.
Is this maybe the end of that competitive era? Do you think this season's more of maybe like a retooling year for that? Because how are they going to replace the Diggs loss? I guess I get that they have, other receivers. They got Gabe
Sure.
Davis and some good young guys, but like who's really going to fill those shoes of Stephon Diggs?
I don't know. I think that to your point. I think everything boils down to two things. One, how good's Miami? Okay, because that's really their competition in that division. Now, there's a incredible question mark, and the question mark is in green and white and is in the Meadowlands where the Jets play. Aaron Rodgers is likely going to be the quarterback. He's not going to be running for vice president, which is very good for the country. Greatly appreciate the fact that he's not doing that. Um, but I don't know what Aaron Rodgers is going to bring to the party. We'll see. But so there's a question mark there. More to the point, as I said, it's really, but are the Dolphins going to be able to take that next step? They haven't yet. I mean, they've done well, but they have not made that next step. And if they've got the players to do it, there's no question about that. They got the coach who does a great job down there. But you know, you got to get you got to get deep into the playoffs, and that's just not Miami yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that could definitely be the way to look at it. I think what we're going to see here, I don't think the Bills make a move to try and replace Stephon Diggs with
Hmm.
another number one guy. I think with the emergence of their run game last
Hmm.
season, which is something really they were lacking, Josh
Right,
Allen's been the run game since he got there. So
right.
with the emergence of that, and I believe
Hmm.
they picked up a running back as well, didn't
They
they?
did, yeah,
Yeah. So they got a stronger, maybe between the tackles kind of guy. I forget who it
right.
was,
They
but
got a power
but
rusher. Yeah.
yeah, but I think they're gonna lean more on the running game this year, and
Hmm.
I think we're gonna see them draft a wide receiver maybe in the first round, if not the second round for sure.
Well, there's value in the later rounds in wide receiver, so I think they could get away with going, maybe a third, a fourth, a fifth, even a fifth round, and get some value in wide receivers.
Well,
So
I only say first and second because we know with the quarterbacks, they're such
well,
hot commodities this year.
true,
Every other one we got, QB, wide receiver,
right?
QB, wide receiver. So
QB
who
wide
knows
receiver,
what's gonna be left? It's
edge
all good.
rusher, yeah,
It's all gonna be the number one edge rushers and linebackers in the country. Who wants
right.
those, right?
So other than Marvin Harrison, if your name is not Marvin Harrison Jr.,
Yeah.
you're going to have to sit back and watch a lot of the draft for a while anyway. So yeah, I think that now to your point, as the torch been passed, I only brought up the East. Okay, I don't think they're going to go deep into the playoffs. I think you're right there. I think that window of the potential of them winning a Super Bowl has, if it didn't close last year, it certainly is closed now. Um, and I mean, look, they've been competitive and they've played very well. But you could look at them in parallel to what the Green Bay Packers were with Aaron Rodgers. They were tremendous during this regular season. They'd get into the playoffs. They may win a game or two even in the playoffs, but they just weren't going to get over the hump. And I think that's the problem. It's Buffalo. It's not necessarily that Buffalo isn't talented. It's that they aren't as talented as the teams that they have to beat to get there.
Yeah, and they're not as talented as the team they've had,
Yeah,
last season and the
sure.
few seasons before that. And if you couldn't win with those teams, what in my mind tells me you're going to win this year now that you've
Hmm.
given away your number one wide receiver? So
Hmm.
yeah, I see things like that, and I really worry for the Bills. maybe, they're just trying to go in a different direction. Like I said, I think they're going to lean more on the run game now, and you might see them draft some young guys for Josh Allen to grow with. And they got some good tight ends there as well.
Sure.
I believe it was Dawson Knox is their guy up there. So he's a solid tight end for sure. So we'll have to see what this Buffalo Bills team, and hell, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they go make a splash. It was just we needed to get Diggs out of town because he's never happy. Wasn't happy in Minnesota. He's not happy here. Let's just get him out of here, and we'll find somebody else, possibly. But we'll see.
But I like what you talked about in regards to the run game. I think what we're seeing is teams valuing something they hadn't valued in a while, and that's the running game. I mean, if you look at Baltimore, they made it to the championship game based on the fact that they ran the ball. Look at Tennessee and what they've done over the years, and hell, even Kansas City did that little. They ran, but they also did that little toss pass of throw a ball about 5 yards down the field and then let the running back run with it. So I think that the teams are looking at the run and saying, you know what, if we can learn to run, we can shorten the games and we can cause we can get some wins. So the philosophy may be in Buffalo, let's try it. We know that Josh can run, right? We've got some running backs there. We got a decent offensive line. We got some players who can get deep if need be. We don't need Stephon Diggs to make that happen. So yeah, maybe that is. Maybe their theory of the case is let's change course a bit and see if that works for us. Maybe it does.
And especially, with the turnover trouble Josh Allen has had, how do you stop the interceptions?
You can.
You throw the ball less and you run the ball more. All of a sudden, you keep it out of his hands and he doesn't have to force that throw downfield. All of a sudden, you'll see how those interceptions get cut in half.
The old Woody Hayes line that why don't you pass? Well, because 2 out of 3 things that happen are not good. So that was Woody's theory of the case on that. But yeah, I mean that's fair. And as we said before, if we've had some poking fun at some of these draft boards, and it does seem to look like quarterback, and then edge rusher, then quarterback, then edge rusher, then quarterback, then edge rusher, with the exception of Marvin Harrison. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. I'm trying to recall, and I guess you'd have to say Jim McMahon, although Jim McMahon, in fairness, wasn't that good a quarterback. Have the Bears had a quarterback in? They haven't had one in your lifetime. I can tell you that. Okay, I'm not so sure they had one in my lifetime. I mean, again, I'm not throwing shade on Jim, who took them to a Super Bowl, but Jim McMahon was not a great quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, look at Mitchell Trubisky, right? People seem to forget that was a 12-win team before he got ran out of Chicago. Right. They made the playoffs with Matt Nagy. They were one of the best teams.
They went to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman.
Yeah, so, there is a formula there, and this is why I love defense so much. We saw the Jaguars a few years ago with Blake Bortles get to the AFC Championship where, Tom Brady took him to the woodshed, but what do you expect, right? The defense all kept them in that game still. So, but now the NFL wants to officiate defense out of the game completely. So I'm wondering how it'll affect maybe some of the draft boards with these players, and I think you're seeing that with the run games too, why teams are going back to the run game. The last few years, it's been all the young, flashy quarterback and the flashy offense. Everybody loves scoring. But I think people are realizing now, with the amount of younger quarterbacks that are coming in the league now and really taking over the starting roles, there's more so these younger guys now starting to get their shot as the older ones are getting phased out. You even mentioned yesterday talking about getting rid of Dak Prescott now. So, right, it's the age of the younger quarterback. But I think last year specifically was a big year for a lot of these teams. Especially we'll use the Washington Commanders as an example. I think you realize when you don't have a run game, you're just going to get your young guy killed out there.
Right.
You need a running game to take some stress off. The
Mhm.
running game helps open up passing lanes. It does so much more than just running the ball downfield. So definitely, I think that's what you're seeing. I think the David Carr record getting broken maybe had something to do with that. Like, hey, we can't just send a guy, especially if you have a bad offensive
Right.
line. You need somewhat of a dynamic running back who's going to be able to get you yards when the offensive line can't.
Well, and you know you can't overlook the success that Kyle Shanahan has had in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I mean, with McCaffrey, and not everybody can get Christian McCaffrey. We get that, okay? But the running game was something that they leaned on, and it didn't hurt them. It didn't hurt them at all. They did very well. They made it to the playoffs and championship game. They and they got to the world championship, to the Super Bowl. They couldn't get past a good Kansas City team, but again, just because they didn't win the Super Bowl doesn't mean they're not a good football team.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Look at all the teams that went far in the playoffs. They all had running games. I don't think people
Exactly.
realize, because it's all Mahomes. He didn't have receivers this season. They
No.
had a strong running game and a strong defense. That's what got them to the Super Bowl. That is
Right.
literally, that was the winning formula: defense and run game. And the same thing with the Ravens, who got to the AFC Championship. Same thing with the 49ers, who got to the Super Bowl. These were all teams with good defense and running games. So, the proof is in the pudding.
I fully, I'm with you, my brother. So let's get an amen to that. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I think that we're going to see some interesting things. I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday who follows college football, and we'll have to have him on the show. Jason, here's why. Okay, I'm going to tell you why. Jason spent the last 22 years as a beat writer following the Oklahoma Sooners. So he has seen every Oklahoma Sooner football game, before the 22 years he became the key beat writer for them. He has known every coach. He has known every player on that team. And we had a chat yesterday about, what's going to happen in college football. And, one of the things that we both talked about was Texas got a soft schedule in the SEC while Oklahoma didn't. But we both agreed that Oklahoma is probably going to do better than Texas because of Brent Venables. And Brent Venables is a guy who preaches defense, and Oklahoma is going to have a damn good defense this year, I should say.
Yeah, and that was a big reason why I was high on Oklahoma last year. The offense let me down in various spots.
Sure.
They beat Texas when they needed to. And it was the defense's improvement that really kept their hopes alive in that first half of the season. So I totally agree. I expect the defense will be better. And you're absolutely right. That's what the SEC is, right? It's all about physicality and defense. So we'll see what those softies in Texas can do, because their secondary was atrocious last year.
They'll get torched. I mean, they're gonna get torched. But I don't know if you remember, but we had so much fun with poor Vanderbilt. Oh my God, Vanderbilt's schedule is Vanderbilt's schedule.
Yeah,
Vanderbilt and Florida.
The SEC has the strongest schedule in the country, easily.
Florida ranked number 1, Vanderbilt ranked number 2, and we're talking about in strength of schedule. And the only reason that I think Florida got to that point was their non-SEC games. One's with Miami and the other's with UCF. So that's the reason. There's no Sisters of the Poor on the Gators schedule. And oh, by the way, welcome back Graham Mertz to the team. Interesting enough. So hang on one second. I'm going to mute myself, and you can talk a little bit, because this is.
Yeah, well, we'll see we'll see what happens with Graham Mertz there. That's interesting that they're bringing him back. I'll give him some credit. He did have a very good completion percentage throughout most of the first half of the season. Anyway, at least he was above 75%. I think he was almost on Bo Nix level pretty much with his completion percentage. So definitely there's that, but. I'm still not sold on Graham Mertz, but I'll give him some credit that he was
Give him a
better
little
in
leeway.
Florida.
Yeah. This just in, we have water back in the building, which is good to know. Had a water main break, so there you go. I know everyone was on the edge of their seat wanting to know that. Yeah, I mean, look, Graham Mertz had the silliness about this is Graham Mertz had the best completion average of anybody in the Southeastern Conference from a quarterback standpoint. So, you look at it and you go, how did that happen? It's like, because they didn't win that much, but he did complete the pass. So one would assume that the passes that he completed, the person on the other end didn't run very far with it. So that's probably how that worked. But
the passes to the running back,
right, throwing it to the coach. So and speaking of the coach, Billy Napier is probably going to be someone who's under the gun. They've given him a lot of time and a lot of resources, and they didn't do it, so he couldn't. His to play in a bowl game against UCF. So there's going to be some interesting things. I'll tell you what I'm interested in. See if you're in that same ballpark. FSU and Clemson are suing the ACC to get out. I don't know where they're going because the SEC has no interest in Clemson
we
or
joined
Florida
Notre
State.
Dame.
Where are you going, boys and girls?
They're joining Notre Dame, and they're going to go make their own 3-team conference.
Right. So anyway, last year FSU was undefeated. Okay. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. They did get DJ Uyalungwe, and I think that's an upgrade at quarterback. An upgrade over. I should be more. It's an upgrade over the backups that they had because they now have a new. They had a hole there for starting quarterback, but so without question, I see DJ is a good fit, but they lost a lot of players to the NFL, and I don't know that they replaced all those players. And you can say, well, the ACC's down, as they have been in the past, but I don't think that FSU and if FSU and Clemson are 8 and 9 win teams this year, I think the bombast that they make, they want out of the conference because their brands are worth more, might ring hollow.
Yeah, well, the thing with Clemson is every year for the last 5 straight years, they've been in the top 4, according to the odds makers, to win the national championship. And right. they've done nothing since that last national championship they were in with the Jaguars quarterback.
It's LSU is what you're talking about. No.
I'm totally blanking on his name for some reason.
The
Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence, yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't he?
Yeah,
he was the last time they were in, right?
Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah. Once he left, I mean, obviously they had those good years with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence after, but since those days, this team has not been the same. And really, Dabo Swinney hasn't done much to fix it. So that's my concern with Clemson this year. Every year we expected them to do something, and they haven't really righted the ship from a few years ago.
I have a theory. Follow the timeline when, as we just talked about Oklahoma and their lovely coach, okay, follow the timeline from when Brent Venables left Clemson as the defensive coordinator and how Clemson has not gone up, but has gone down. The reason being, say what you will, Brent Venables and that defense at Clemson, no matter how good the offense was, and they had some great offenses. I think I'm in a perpetual loop here, telling me that I've got my water on this, which is really nice for them to do. Yes, thank you. So yeah, I mean, Brent Venables brought that team defense, and that allowed Dabo to worry about and concern himself with the offense. Dabo's clueless when it comes to defense, and they didn't. You don't replace a Brent Venables. You don't. And so I think if you draw a timeline from when Brent left there to take the job at Oklahoma, I think you have to look at it and say, wow, this is this is one of those amazing times when when a coach, an assistant coach, goes and you lose, you fall off the edge of the earth. And I think Dabo without Brent Venables he's just not going to be able to replicate the success that they had at Clemson.
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge part of what's happened to this team for sure.
Yeah, I mean, because if you look, I mean, Alabama's been good. Alabama can be good, and the reason, of course, was, without question, Nick Saban. Just Saban is a defensive guy, but his guy goes to Georgia, defensive coordinator. That's not as big a loss for him. It is a bigger loss in this regard. Georgia now goes after the same people that Alabama does, and they get them. So it makes it a little tougher for Nick. And so Nick decided, you know what? Things are changing. The tide's rolling out for me. No pun intended. Why don't I get out of here while I'm still, close to the top? And I think that was what happened with him. But we'll see. We'll see how they play out, because there's a lot of chatter out there about FSU and Clemson wanting to go to other conferences because they feel as if they're very valuable commodities. I do not in any way, shape, or form think that FSU and Clemson are not worthy of getting more money than they're getting. But I don't also think that if I'm the Big Ten or the Southeastern Conference, I'm not rushing to add either of them.
Yeah, definitely, especially with the Big Ten just had their ad, and obviously the SEC brought in 2 teams, but not nearly as much as the Big Ten and Big 12.
Well, you're right. The Big Ten and Big 12 added so many teams that they're going to have to have at least a couple years just to see if this concept of the super conference it makes any sense at all.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like the Big Ten. Okay, the Big Ten took 4 teams this year, but and I think the Big 12 took 4 teams as well. But that's on top of
that's on top of 4 teams they took.
That's on top of the 4 teams they took: Cincinnati, BYU. Right. So UCF, they weren't expecting that, right? And now you got this 18-team conference or whatever, the Big 18, whatever the hell it is now.
You onboarded 4 Pac-12 teams. So, I don't know. I mean, suddenly your number 1 football team is Utah and your number 1 basketball team is Houston, and those 2 teams were not in your conference 2 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point to make.
The Big Ten has SC and UCLA coming, along with Washington and Oregon. So, it's you didn't do any favors to a number of the schools in the conference by bringing on those 4 teams. Now UCLA is going to have a problem because Chip left and we've chronicled that.
For the hills.
Chip
ran. We're going to the Big Ten. I can't.
Oh, we're going to the Big Ten. Okay, I'm going to go to Ohio State. So
can't beat them, join them.
Exactly. So that's a problem. Lincoln Riley, it's going to be interesting to see what Lincoln Riley does with going on at SC, because SC, of course, there's going to be a new sheriff in town from that standpoint. But at the end of the day, I think, and I'm talking about the quarterbacks. So we'll have to see what Lincoln Riley can do with SC, and that we said James Franklin's got to do something at Penn State. Getting tired of not Penn State not getting to past Ohio State and Michigan. So it's going to be interesting. I'm sure that the place is going to be packed when UCLA comes over and plays Maryland in in a football game over at College Park, or Rutgers host Oregon up there in the Meadowlands. I'm sorry, up in Piscataway. So it's going to be interesting, to say the least, as we get closer and closer to college football, which we're not at the moment. We still have college basketball to concern ourselves with, and that leads me to you, my friend. You've got stuff which we're going to be talking about tomorrow, probably on today's docket.
Yeah, we got not a heavy night. Make sure you check out my premium picks at bigal.com, pickadvisor.com, and theinsidersroom.com. The links are in the description below. All I got is 2 plays up for tonight. I got a Copa Libertadores play if you're looking for some action later on the pitch. And I have 1 play in the MLB that you can go get. So make sure you check that out. Like I said, not a heavy day, but yeah, tomorrow we'll be back in full swing. We got the knit final and lots of other good stuff. So just taking the night off NBA. So yeah, make sure you check that out.
A couple quick score updates. Los Angeles Angels are up on the Marlins. We're talking about the bottom of the 5th at 6-2. Angels on the Marlins. The Rays and the Rangers. This game's in the top of the 7th. The Rangers just scored in the top of the 7th. They're leading the Rays at the Trop 1-0. The Royals are in Baltimore. It is raining. I can tell you, as I look out the window, it's still raining. That may not happen. They may not play that game. We'll find out. The Red Sox and the Athletics, that's a 3:37 start. The Yankees and the D-backs, 3:40 start. Phillies and Reds, that's a 4:05 start in Philadelphia. The Guardians and the Mariners, that's a 4:10 start. Also a 4:10 start, the Cardinals and the Padres. And then the Pirates at the Nationals is a 6:45, and then we get into the late games. There's a full slate of the NBA tonight, pretty much of a full slate in the NHL, and as Amedeus mentioned, there's some college basketball out there tonight to watch as well. So lots to take in if you are someone who wants to watch some sporting events. Also, a quick plug on Apple TV. The Dynasty. It's a great documentary on the Patriots. And even if you hate the Patriots, it's a good documentary to watch that part too. So we'll see. Anyway, for Amedeus, I'm Jim. Thanks for joining us, gang. We will be back tomorrow on a Thursday, and we hope you have a nice day. Take care, everybody. Bye.